Welcome back, everyone. Please take your seats for the final session of our summit this afternoon. So our final session goes under the banner of future-proofing wind power. So what we're doing here is we're looking forward to some of the challenges that wind power is going to help address in the future, and some of the opportunities that will bring. And we're going to kick off with a presentation, an address from Jotun, and specifically from Anders Skilbred. And he's going to tell us about enabling the future of energy, bringing experience and adapting to new industries. So Anders, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. As you can see, I'm obviously not one of those good-looking, clever senior vice presidents that has been in the podium before me today. I am a good-looking and clever global sustainability manager from a paints and coatings company called Jotun. And I got 10 minutes to talk a little bit about what we're doing in the paints and coatings industry and how we are enabling the future of energy. But I also wanted to talk a little bit from the perspective as an industrial partner or an industrial producer and manufacturer. Because Jotun, we have been around for 100 years. We are in 4 segments. We are delivering paints and coatings to houses, bridges, infrastructure, oil and gas, and we are also by far the biggest marine coatings supplier in the world, approximately 25% of the total global market. And when we talk about the wind industry, we see that the wind industry is, of course, also growing and becoming a more and more globalized industry. And therefore, like the oil and gas industry, we need to make sure that we also have a global and sustainable supply chain. So we, as a paints manufacturer, we are in 100 countries. We are located around the world, also in China. We have, what we say, around 11,000 dedicated employees. I think we have 5,000 more of undedicated employees, I don't know. But at least we are also then having 40 factories around the world. So in order to deliver 2 global projects, you need a global supply chain, and you need the same products to be available wherever you choose to select your supplier. And inherently, our purpose is, of course, to protect property. That's very simple, it's easy, but it's also, of course, a complex matter. But that's our purpose, to protect your valuable assets for as long as possible in the most challenging conditions of the world. This is our headquarters in Sandefjord. We are very proud of that. But we also have a footprint, of course. We produce around 1 billion liters, 1.2 billion liters of paint every year. And that has a footprint. As an industrial manufacturer, we have a significant footprint. And we use this value chain to explain and to kind of communicate this. But of course, all our 40 factories around the world, they require energy. They require a stable energy source. And we also have, of course, a mass of our footprint is upstream and downstream from our own operation. So our total footprint is 4.3 million tons of CO2. Our entire operation is only 1.9% of that. So the vast majority of our footprint is outside our direct control. So in order for us to work with our footprint, we can easily see that, for instance, raw materials, upstream, 65% of our total emissions are related to the raw materials that we bring into our factories to produce paint. And we take our responsibility. We reduce whatever we can in our own operation by, for instance, installing solar panels on all our factories and purchasing renewable energy. But of course, this is not enough. Only 1.9% of our total emissions is related to our direct emissions. Hence, what we see is the best and most effective way for reducing our total footprint of course, is electrification throughout our value chain, specifically at our supplier sites. This means that our suppliers, they need access to readily available, affordable, renewable energy. So we very much hope that you and we succeed doing this, and therefore we need the wind industry. Of course, we have done our part on our journey. We do our part, we try to reduce, and we get good scores, but none of this is possible without a continuous and further development of the renewable energy industry. So when we talk about our role in this, we talk about enabling the future of energy. By that, of course, there are many parts of a wind industry that is important, and we are part of that. But our task is, of course, to protect these valuable assets for as long as possible, throughout the lifetime of the asset. The lifetime of the asset, however, we see that is continuously shifting. We started out, the lifetime would be 25 years, now we're talking 35 years, because the margins are going down. The last or the highest number that I got from an operator, a wind operator, is 56 years without maintenance. So we have to deliver corrosion protection that will last for 56 years without any maintenance in an offshore environment. That is possible to do, and it's also quite easy to give guarantees on this because we will be retired by then anyway, so we don't really care. But it is a challenge for us. So it is important for the whole industry to also, of course, then look into what can we contribute with. Of course, contributing with extended lifetime. I think that also, coming from a nation, I'm from Norway, coming from a nation with a lot of offshore assets, is there one thing that we like less in Norway than to lose to a Swede in any sport? Now we beat them in football, so now it's okay. It is to decommission offshore assets. And we also expect that a lot of this lifetime extension that we have seen in oil and gas will also come into play in the wind energy business. One of the panelists talked about we have to learn from oil and gas. Yes, we have to learn from oil and gas. We have been protecting, this is the first producing oil and gas platform on the Norwegian continental shelf, the Ekofisk. We have protected that for decades until that was decommissioned. And what we learned from there is, of course, transferred over to wind energy. So yes, we take the experience and the knowledge from the oil and gas industry and bring it over to the wind industry. And we see that, of course, we need to reduce the amount of maintenance because there are also differences between the oil and gas industry and the wind industry. One thing, it seems like the money is completely different. They are fewer and they are smaller in the wind industry compared to the oil and gas industry. Also in the oil and gas industry, we have usually people around that can do maintenance without any very intensive bringing them out with barges and stuff. That is not the question in the wind industry. So maintenance is out of the question. So therefore you have to consider CapEx versus OpEx again and again. Another main difference is, of course, the crucial need for speed of production. Production speed is completely different. Instead of building one big jacket, we're producing now hundreds of monopiles at one site. So this wind industry, in scaling this up, we close into more on the mass production scale of things. And then you also need to select solutions that fit to the mass production scale of things. So yes, we believe that we protect what matters most, and it's only this small fraction of a 0.3 millimeter that it takes to protect these assets, but it's actually a very important 0.3 millimeter. I wanted to round off with a short video, because whenever I work with sustainability, as a sustainability manager, we talk a lot about transition. Transitioning to a renewable and a more sustainable future. And that sounds very scary and difficult and everything, but we actually think that, yes, we have been around for 100 years. This is just another thing that we have to adapt to, and I hope that we can do that together. So let's see if we go.
Jotun's headquarters, completed in 2019, stands as a symbol of progress and innovation. But this journey began long before, right here in Sandefjord in 1926. It was here that Odd Gleditsch founded Jotun, laying the foundation for nearly a century of excellence in paints and coatings. From its humble beginnings, Jotun has evolved over time, navigating challenges, overcoming obstacles, yet steadily growing stronger, step by step. Over the course of our history, Jotun has continuously developed and made bold decisions of change. Transitioning can be hard, but one thing we have learned is that standing still is not an option. For 100 years, we have served our customers and society by protecting properties. We will continue this mission when we now embark on the journey of delivering solutions with great impact while reducing our footprint. A journey towards a more sustainable future.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Anders, for that insight from Jotun. Now it's time for our next panel, and I'm very pleased to say this is on a topic that has really shot up the agenda for the industry. Wind theft, the industry's big wake-up call. And I'm going to welcome on stage my colleague, Cosmo Sanderson, who's our head of news at Recharge, who's a journalist who's really led the way in reporting this. He's going to be joined by Eirik Finseres from Wickborg Rain, Scott Urquhart from Asia Insights, and Martin Dorenkamper from Fraunhofer Institute for Wind Energy Systems to discuss this extremely interesting topic for the offshore sector and give us some insights. So please take the stage, everyone.
Hello, can everyone hear me? Yes. Hello, my name is Cosmo Sanderson and I'm head of news at Recharge. Thank you all for joining us today and staying with us this afternoon for this discussion on wind wakes. Wind wakes, wake losses, wind shadowing, wind theft. This is a phenomenon that goes by many names, but whatever you prefer to call it, this is an issue that has undoubtedly become an increasingly hot topic in the wind industry in the last year. This is in no small part to a who's who of the West's biggest offshore wind developers clashing over inter-farm wake losses in planning proceedings for new offshore wind farms in the UK. Owners of existing wind farms have raised concerns that wakes from new planned projects could significantly lower the power their turbines are able to produce and the revenues they are able to generate, with potentially disastrous consequences. In Germany, meanwhile, we have even seen leading developer RWE call for the government to lower its offshore wind target, in no small part due to concerns over wake effects. To state the obvious, offshore wind developers are not in the habit of calling on governments to cut offshore wind targets. This is the industry saying loud and clear, Houston, we have a problem. We're therefore lucky to be joined today by three leading experts on the topic. And I'm going to address the first question to Martin. So for those who may not be so familiar with wind wakes, big picture, what are wind wakes and why are they such a big problem?
Yeah, thank you, first of all, for having me here. And I want to start probably with a little provocative statement that a wake of a wind turbine is actually a good thing, because it shows that the wind turbine is doing what it should do, convert the kinetic energy from the wind towards the electric energy. The problem starts when you try to put them into wind farms that are too closely spaced to each other, and then there's a difference, let's say, between onshore and offshore wind farms, while onshore sites, especially in Europe, we have a lot of settlements everywhere around, then some other usage like forests and so on, so you cannot really put the turbines so close together, so you have typically very small wind farms in Europe, onshore. This is not the case, for instance, in China or also in the US, where you can also see a lot of large wind farms with several hundreds of turbines. While offshore, especially in the North Sea, we are seeing a lot, thousands of turbines being very closely packed together, also for reasons of cost, right? So you want to keep all the rest, like the cabling costs, for instance, also down. So you place them closer together, and then they interact with each other. And the other factor that also plays a role here is that while you see at onshore sites a lot more turbulence in the atmosphere, the wakes then also do faster vanish, and in the not so rough on offshore surface, you then have also more persistent wakes, where we've seen wakes reaching 150 kilometers that was measured with an aircraft in the North Sea.
Mm-hmm. And just a little follow-up there. And how severe can these wakes be? And I appreciate that will vary over distance, but if you're 10 kilometers away, for example, from a neighboring wind farm, what order of the wind's intensity is being sapped by one wind farm to the next?
Yeah, that's a question that I always get, and that's a little difficult to say, because it really depends on how the individual wind farm is planned, and also sometimes it's mixed up, like what is a wind farm to the wind. So if you look at the plans that's for the North Sea, technically for the wind there is no German wind farm and then individual wind farms in Germany. It's rather like a huge wind farm cluster stretching from the Netherlands up to Denmark. And that's what the wind sees then. And inside this big wind farm cluster, we have very dense installations of more than 10 megawatts per square kilometer. And then it drops down to 30% or even more in some areas wake loss. And that's, of course, then something that's tricky to handle.
Yeah. And Martin, you of course work for an institution that's taken a leading role in researching wind wakes. What research is being carried out currently, and what does it hope to achieve?
I mean, we are having a lot of projects, research projects on wakes, but just to mention two. One is Eurowind Wakes. It's a project that's co-funded by the European Commission, and there we are developing models and validating those models for being able to have as best possible precise estimates of the wake effects over large areas like the whole North Sea. Together with developers that provide us wind farm production data, where we can really also tune our models and calibrate our models too. In another project, it's a living lab, 70 gigawatts offshore wind, so it's very dedicated to the 70 gigawatts offshore wind expansion goal of Germany. And there we are looking a lot in what do other effects of wakes are, so effects also on the environment, marine environment, and all these connections that all will play a role in the future.
Yeah, and I understand that are you working with a few developers on the project that you're working on? Are developers being quite sort of cooperative in assisting research in wind wakes?
Yes, I mean it has taken quite a lot of time to convince them that it's needed to provide us with data, because this will continue to grow. Because I mean there is some uncertainty still in the models, because we are modeling something that exists in the future. There is no data yet on so dense and huge wind farms, so that's why we need more collaboration also continuously over the next years.
Yeah, thank you. So we've had a great overview of what wind wakes are and why they're such a big problem. I'll turn to Scott now, who I think it's worth noting spent 7 years at Ørsted before joining GEAR, including as a project CFO in the UK. So I think combined with your more recent work on this topic at GEAR, I think it makes you especially well suited to answer my next question, which is how big a financial impact can wind wakes have on developers and asset owners?
Well, thank you very much. I mean, there's an interesting recharge history on this. I think one of the first times where it became very central topic in industry was 2019, and Ørsted put out this quite awkwardly technical press release about, we're looking at the data, and we think it points to that industry is underestimating the impacts of wake blockage and wake effects. It was a uniquely kind of technical worded press release for Ørsted, and Recharge picked up a really, really nice article on that, and Ørsted share price dropped to 8% on the back of that news, and it was pretty much a cross-portfolio range of 1% to 2% downward adjustment of long-term production forecast that was stated in that, which is massive. So that was like the first big shock, and then I think from there, you know, the topic and awareness has just continued to grow today, and getting a lot more people focusing on the commercial impacts. And I think like a really interesting story I tell on this, coming from being a project CFO, is that there's a lot of different investment stages in a project. I mean, I sat over west of Dutton Sands and Racebank in the UK. You could look at our financial statements and figure out that a project like that, you know, probably landed at a 15% IRR or higher as the project owner when we built that. But then you go on and you sell down half the project to people like Macquarie and Sumitomo, who then step in at construction phase. And then later, Macquarie sells down to an infrastructure fund, and each step is someone that is getting a lower return or IRR on their investment. So if you're the last person in line who maybe has a 6% IRR on your project share, and then you're potentially losing 0.5% or 1% of production on that, it's extremely painful for those investors at the very end. So I think that it's, you know, any measurable percentage that was unaccounted for can really hurt investors. You know.
And you know, some of the percentages that have been talked about in these UK disputes, where you know an incumbent developer has modelled how much they think a newcomer project is going to steal of their wind. I mean, they're not talking about 0.5%; they're talking about 3%, 4%, maybe 5%. I mean, how painful is that? How serious is that?
I mean, that can wipe out profits. I mean, would say though that at least today there's a much higher awareness that when people are stepping into making investment decisions, they are looking at a wide range of sensitivities of what that future could be. But I mean, yeah, you know, in the UK, when you're having these wake disputes, it's usually talking somewhere between 0 to 5% because the spacing is a bit more generous. You know, kind of wake interference in German context can be 20, 30, maybe even 50%. Yeah. Pretty big numbers.
Yeah. And I think it's sort of worth noting, you know, some of our reporting this year, Ørsted previously said that wind wakes from new projects in the Irish Sea threaten coexistence with its existing assets there. And essentially what Ørsted was saying was that it might decide not to extend the lifetime of those existing wind farms if those new projects were built and crippled their revenues. And ultimately Ørsted did enter into some sort of wake loss or wake mitigation agreement with those developers regarding those wind farms. And another case study, Equinor and SSE have said that wake losses caused by RWE's 3 gigawatt Dogger Bank South project could cost their own existing and planned Dogger Bank sites nearby £582 million or $778 million over those projects' lifetimes. So that big number there. So Scott, how can developers and other stakeholders protect themselves from this growing threat? What tools do they have available to them?
Yeah, I mean, and I think there's excellent people like Martin and his team that handle really like the kind of wake modeling side, and there's also you know, institutes like Danish Technical University and several startups that are dedicated on advanced wake modeling like Whiffle and Veer. You know, the place where we saw an opportunity is really on the commercial modeling and planning side, is that we'd be approached by M&A people, investment funds that are looking at transactions and want to be able to quickly do commercial simulations of a lot of different wake models and also timing of projects that could affect them. And that's where we collaborated with a few infrastructure funds and major developers to try to build a commercial model that could do extremely fast commercial simulations of these different cases, so you could at least put boundaries of what's at risk on your business case. You know.
And turning to Eirik now, I referred earlier to the fact that we've seen major developers clashing over wake losses. Can you give us an overview? What legal issues do interfarm wake losses throw up? And I'm just going to quickly sort of read out a quote that a lawyer representing RWE, from a lawyer representing RWE in one of these UK planning proceedings. And he said, "I've been doing this for 20 years now, offshore wind farm planning, and there's nothing comparable to this, wind wakes, in terms of a new issue emerging that has gone off in a completely unexpected direction and has created the amount of complexity and concern that this issue has done." So with that, to sort of tee you up, any legal issues that this has caused at all?
Well, I suppose I agree to some extent. Right, so the legal issues are manifold. So I'm going to start by thinking about sort of like the grand scheme of it all, right, from a somewhat holistic perspective. And, we know that the North Sea and other European exclusive economic zones, they will be densely populated by offshore wind farms at some point if we are going to implement 300 gigawatt by 2050. So wake effects are unavoidable, essentially, or rather likely. So that means that we have to devise some sort of a legal mechanism in order to ensure that developers are not disincentivized, essentially, to develop. In the first instance, I suppose you can describe wake issues as, first and foremost, a planning issue, right? You should try your best through, for example, marine spatial planning procedures to ensure that there is generous spacing between wind farms in order to mitigate the wake effect itself. Wake effects should definitely try to be solved at a relatively early stage. The big concern, of course, is that if you can't really mitigate the issue, then how do you handle it? And so if you do find that there is a regulatory gap on this issue already, actually, and if we don't have clear legal certainty within the area, developers will very likely be disincentivized to develop wind farms, which can jeopardize the energy transition at large, right? And also, there is another related issue, and that is that wake effects can cause what is known as a race to the water phenomenon, whereby developers rush planning procedures and also the maturing of project areas in order to reap the available resource that is there already. But I suppose that the very heart of the legal issue is essentially that you can't really steal something that you don't own. When an offshore wind farm developer, and that's, by the way, the concept of wind theft, or rather the terminology is a bit misleading, right? Because you can't actually steal something that you don't own. So that's a bit unfortunate. So yeah, I mean, there's a whole wide range of legal issues on this topic. It's difficult to know where to begin, but when you do receive a license to develop and operate a wind farm, it is for the purposes of granting a developer exclusive rights to build the wind farm and also to exploit the resource. It does not grant the developer an exclusive right to the resource itself. So that seems to be the very heart of the legal issue.
Yeah. And what legal protections, if any, do wind farm developers have when it comes to getting waked by a new neighboring project?
That's a very difficult question to answer because this hasn't actually been tested in courts yet. What you do find under international law is that where a proposed offshore wind farm is liable to have a transboundary wake effect going into a neighboring exclusive economic zone, is that the coastal state in question have to consult the affected state. They have to cooperate in good faith, essentially. So that translates into an obligation of conduct as opposed to result, right? And I think that has two very important functions. The first function, of course, by or rather through consultation, is that you will try to mitigate that harm to the extent possible, such that you don't have to consult the other state, because that will likely trigger some politically sensitive discussions, perhaps. The other one is, of course, that where you do cooperate with your neighbors, you will very likely produce better locations for the proposed wind farms, etc. So under international law, you have to cooperate with your neighboring states. Under other civil law jurisdictions, you tend to have this sort of very general principle in which you have to be a good neighbor under planning and building regimes, for example, or frameworks. But those rules or principles, they are very loose and they don't have any teeth to them, essentially, which shows you that it's a very ambiguous legal area at the national level, at least.
Yeah. And we've seen recently in the UK wake effects written into updated national policy statements which guide the planning authorities on whether or not to approve projects, including offshore wind farms. And interesting to note, crucially, on the issue of potential compensation payments for wake effects, the government said that it maintains that wake effects are a commercial matter to be resolved between developers and the planning system. And the planning system is not expected to adjudicate on compensation arrangement for wake effects. So this is basically sort of throwing it to the developers to fight amongst themselves over. Is that?
Oh, for sure. It's very much shifting the risk onto the industry. That's definitely the case. But I think we should all be reminded that this is a guidance. So it's not legally binding as such, but it's meant to, I don't know, incentivize as a soft rule, essentially, whereby developers have to cooperate. Perhaps enter into discussions and negotiations with a view of entering into, for example, wake agreements.
Yeah. So we've had a great overview from each of our panelists now on what wind wakes are, the financial heartache that they can cause developers, and the legal issues they pose. So I'm going to open the conversation off a bit and address the rest of these questions to the panel as a whole. And the first one is that there is a lot of possibility, there's a lot of talk around the possibility of mitigating inter-farm wind wakes from new projects without financial compensation. And this can include changing the planned turbine layout in wind farms or modifying how they operate. But are there actually any effective mitigation strategies out there? Well, I think go for it.
I mean, the most effective mitigation strategy is spreading them further out, so if possible, right? So that would require further areas and maybe multi-use concepts if there's a usage of an area already by another party. But there's also, I mean, we are having a project where we are looking actually on capabilities, on controlled cluster wakes, and if we would be able to build higher towers, that's something that where the wakes could benefit, because you can then introduce more momentum from higher down, but that's something that's working, let's say, on a physical, meteorological basis, but the economic question of building that and also the engineering question of building even larger towers is probably something that needs to be taken into account there as well. But a third thing, I mean, there's these control measures of turbines that exist for individual wind farms, and that's a concept where I think that does not work in the cluster wake context, because if a control, I mean, the control thing which is currently implemented somewhere is just to kind of, for instance, yaw the turbines to deflect the wakes. The aim of that is to extract more energy from a certain area. And so if that is successful, you would extract more energy upstream, and then would probably, even in this cluster wake context, one wind farm benefits, but the whole does not necessarily.
Yeah. And I'll read out a quote from some RWE analysis on this point, a blog post on the RWE website from one of their experts, and they said, on paper, wake mitigation is a nice idea. Less wake leads to more energy for downstream farms. However, in practice, this is not the case. Not only is more energy just energy lost to the upstream farm, the downstream farm will never manage to recapture all that lost potential. In trying to mitigate these effects, it is generally necessary to compromise the design of the first farm, resulting in an overall net reduction in output. based on real-life examples, we find that these mitigation options can easily lead to a 50-to-1 ratio of bad to good, with the upstream farm giving up 50 times more energy than the downstream farm recaptures. So that's a fairly bleak assessment, you might say, on the sort of a potential for mitigation, the industry to be able to mitigate its way out of this problem. And any other sort of views on that? Scott, maybe?
Oh, I mean, I think I sit on the side of really good planning. I think we've come a long way on knowledge today versus, I mean, a lot of the stuff that's been built in the last 10 years were actually leases that were handed out in the early 2000s. And I think now we've come up the learning curve on how long these wake effects can draw over. And I think authorities now are very aware. And I think it'll be, again, there's also some tough choices coming up for Germany, future UK leasing on how much they want to squeeze out of the resource. So I think good spacing, thinking of neighbor conflicts is important in lease round planning.
Yeah. And sort of a big question in this context now: where does responsibility lie for compensating wake losses, if they should be compensated at all? I'm gonna look to you, Eirik, the lawyer first.
There's nothing lawyers hate more than political questions, but I'll do my best. So I think it all very much depends on the type of governance model that the coastal state in question is using. The UK leasing system is very much decentralized in the sense that developers sort of drive the development, right? They exercise more discretion in maturing project areas and implementing the project and so on. So I think that in that context, the most recent guidance actually, to some extent at least, makes sense. Because where the developer exercises more discretion, it would make more sense to sort of shift the burden of risk onto them, whereby they essentially have to find some sort of a commercial or perhaps legal solution to the issue, for example, by entering into wake agreements. In Europe, I think the case will be extremely different, and that is because of the most recent Renewable Energy Directive, which is otherwise known as RED III. So RED III essentially mandates that coastal states, European coastal states, have to adopt some rather centralized procedures whereby they designate renewables acceleration areas and so forth. And during that process, it's essentially the coastal state or the national authorities that the whole point of that process is to essentially hand developers a finished product by not even requiring them, in some circumstances, to conduct an environmental impact assessment. In that kind of system, I think it makes more sense to, again, shift the responsibility onto the state, precisely because they are the ones who have matured the project area and also even the project. So it depends on the governance model, perhaps.
Yeah. And any views on whether compensation is a sort of dangerous road to go down for the industry in terms of developers and governments having to sort of pay out to incensed incumbents?
Coming from, I think when first got into this topic, I thought, this smells like something I've seen before. I'm a petroleum engineer from my last life, and widely used concepts of unitization agreements where you share resources. But in oil and gas, you can quantify the resource that's sitting directly under your lease, and it's easier to quantify that finite volume. And I think where those agreements are a bit tougher to apply in wind, where the wind is coming from somewhere else, it's infinite. That then it falls apart. So I think it's a really difficult topic to also compensation debate.
Great. And zooming back out again a little, and there's, as I think was referenced earlier, 300 gigawatts of offshore wind capacity planned for the North Sea by 2050. DNV recently estimated that by mid-century, offshore wind farms will take up almost 9% of the entire North Sea basin. With that in mind, can you all give a view on just how big a threat you think that wind wakes are to the future rollout of offshore wind in the North Sea and indeed elsewhere? Martin, do you want to?
We have, in this autumn, published a study where we were able to actually coordinate it through the German Federal Ministry of the Hydrographic Agency that's kind of planning the areas in Germany, BSH, and we were able to talk to, let's say, all the planning agencies around the North Sea through these North Seas Energy Corporation and really look into the areas that are the most likely ones to be developed. And that's a study that was calculating these maximum wake effects that you could get, so really conservative view on this. And it really showed also, let's say, how different the different plannings in the different countries are. So very dense wind farms in Germany and Belgium, that's actually comparable. I mean, it's a completely different scale, but from the how ambitious the plans are with respect to the area that Belgium has, it's comparable to Germany, up to the UK that has better natural wind resource, of course, so higher winds at hub heights, but also much less dense planned wind farms. And that's really something that shows that the threat is different in all the different countries.
Maybe adding to it, our German research lead did a look at, we put a forecast of, I think, 40 gigawatt build out by 2040 for Germany, and depending on scenario, the wake effect would be as if you're losing 4 gigawatts of the 40 energy output. It'll be different by country, but I mean, this is like big capacity losses.
And do you think there's going to be a need for some kind of international cooperation on this issue, and how could that work? Throw that out again to anyone that wants to bite.
I think it could work through NSEC, for example. I remember when I published the article where I sort of assessed the regulatory gap in this area in early 2024, only as a preprint, actually. Members of the Scottish Parliament asked me the same question. They got in touch, which sort of shows you that there is some political interest in solving this issue as well, which is a good sign, I guess. And that they asked the same question, and to be fair, I'm not entirely sure what kind of forum that the issue should be resolved in, but there seems to be a lot of political will amongst European states in order to cooperate to reach these common targets. So I don't think it's unlikely that states will cooperate.
Yeah. And you will bring different perspectives to this issue. And how alive do you all feel that policymakers are to the issue of interfarm wake losses, and what action would you like to see from them on this front? Go back to Martin, maybe at your experience in terms of support for research and
of course, we need more research. But what I want to say is, like, the current German government even had that in the coalition agreement, right? So they stated that the wake effects are an issue, and a collaboration could be a possibility there. So I think, at least in Germany, there is some awareness, and let's see what the near future brings there.
Yeah. And anyone else want to sort of bite on what you've seen in terms of policymakers taking a sort of proactive approach? And we've seen in the UK that they've started to write this into regulations, for better or worse, depending on your point of view about the position that they've taken. But is there anything else that either of you guys would like to see in terms of action from national governments on this?
More regulation, more legal certainty. I think the guidance that was recently issued by, in the UK, certainly is a step in the right direction.
Yeah. And I'm just looking at a couple of questions from the audience. So Ricardo Rocha from BayWa, do you think that investors could avoid or reduce these risks if they had stronger in-house technical advisory capabilities, particularly in yield and site assessment? Anyone want to go on that?
I mean, I would say from our client base over the last 5 years, we see that people have staffed up. I mean, large players have staffed up significantly on internal resources and computing power, because some of the stuff is computationally very expensive to actually run. I just think, though, that it's not something that everyone can afford to do. And I mean, I think that you'll have big players that can afford to do that, will do it. I think there's really a big place for people like Fraunhofer, and also there's some very specialist wind specialized startups and scale-ups that are also bringing a lot to this, just so that it isn't efficient for everyone to build up their war chest on this. It's good to have some independent groups that can also be a balanced voice in the middle.
Yeah. And another audience question from Andreas Kamleitnip. Sorry, I've butchered your surname, but from DNV. How well are the models used, validated by measurements? This maybe feels like a question for Martin.
Yeah, so there used to be the problem that a lot of these models were validated pretty well against wind measurements, let's say, but there's also some issues that can arise just from the conversion process in these models from wind to yields. So that's why SCADA data is needed, and you were right in saying, I mean, if you start building up a wind farm and the first year of operations is something where there's still some minor issues to be solved, then later on, and you need some years of data. So we can currently validate our models with a turbine generation that's probably 2 generations old, roughly, if we need 5 years of wind farm production data. And with those data, we can get very good results. Yes, with some of the models, there's also models that you can tune and calibrate exactly to providing the correct results, but then it works for this turbine generation, right? And that's why there's this continuous development needed. But there's also been, let's say, a change from the hunt for the perfect model, and nowadays we see more the transition to let's rather look for 3, 4, 5 results from different players, like the ones that you had mentioned. Also us, we are approached, and then this combination is taken into account to also get the uncertainty that might lie in the wake modeling, and also in the assumptions that the different consultants are taking.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, I think we're at about time for this panel, so it just leaves me to please thank our panelists again for their insights, and thank you very much.
Okay, wow, absolutely terrific insight there from Cosmo and his 3 panelists on this this issue. I really enjoyed that. Now we're going to have a presentation, and we're going to hear from Polytech, and they're going to be telling us about IEC standards and lightning protection of wind turbines. And I'm going to invite up on stage to do that Lisa Carloni, who's the lead LPS specialist at Polytech. Lisa, the stage is yours.
Hello. Hi, thanks for having me. Fantastic speakers, so tough follow-up, but I'll try to keep you entertained with this very sexy topic. So I just want to bring you some news from the IEC, so that's the International Electrotechnical Commission. New standards coming up, updated ones, let's look forward. Okay, a little bit about me. So from Polytech, and I'm here representing the Danish standard. Polytech, that's some of you know. If you have a wind turbine, chances are you have one of our components in there, lightning protection or something else. What I'm going to talk about is these regulatory changes. It's about lightning protection of wind turbines. What we're saying is there's a new standard, a new edition of the standard coming up probably first quarter of 2027, which will address some of the issues we've seen with damages. And that means that manufacturers might have to adapt their designs and test facilities. On the other side, we have something entirely new. That's a standard on blade operation. There's never been one before. And so it's going to set the requirements for inspections and engineerings and decide and try to structure the decisions that are behind the operations and the repairs. So again, Dash 24 is about lightning protection of wind turbines, and the Dash 32 is about blade operation. Okay, don't read this all the way through, but a lot of countries are behind this, a lot of people, a lot of entities. Feel free to contact the people who are responsible for the individual committees. Let's start with Dash 24. So that's lightning protection of wind turbines. Big issue, lots of damages as wind turbines get taller and are installed in more remote places. Also, one of the leading causes of insurance claims, so big thing. If you don't know the standard, it talks about lightning exposure, lightning protection design and validation, inspections, lightning monitoring systems. What's new this time is that we're shifting a little bit the focus from which was exclusively on design and validation to the entire wind turbine life cycle. So what are the news? In terms of testing, so things that will affect OEMs, lightning protection level 1 becomes the only option from now on. Second thing's big news in testing, as this brilliant illustration shows. We are going to be testing the middle of the blades as well, not just the tip part, and that has a lot of consequences. A lot of other news. Okay, inspections. It was already there, but now it's very clear. When do you need to inspect? How do you document it? How do you need to store that data of the inspection? Damages, let's classify them. Let's have a common, vocabulary when we're talking about damages, so we can have statistics or sensible statistics. Better definition of acceptable wear. And finally, definition of lightning monitoring class. And here we're talking about lightning protection monitoring class. Now to the new ones. This is a completely new standard on blade operation and maintenance. So what was the thing? There is nothing out there so far to regulate operations. What decisions do you take when you see a damage? So this is an attempt to standardize the qualifications of inspectors, how you do inspections, how do you report them, how do you decide, how do you make a risk-based decision? And also we're just trying to reduce repair failures and the cost of energy and of repeat repairs. So here are what you're going to find in there. Operations, you will see requirements on inspections. How frequent do the inspections need to be? What are the inspector qualifications? What techniques should you be using? Of course, there's room for new techniques, but how should you report? Interestingly, we will not be able to cover transportation or installation, but who knows, maybe in the future. As I was saying, the big thing here is categorization, damage categorization. So when you see a damage, how do you decide which damage category should it be in? What do you do? What's good practice in normal operation? What do you do when you have severe damage? How should you perform a repair? Should you be just keep repairing until the death of the turbine? Yeah, so I went a bit fast, so that was it. This is the end. Just trying to say we're trying to take better decisions, better informed decisions when we face a damage. And that's it.
Okay, thank you very much, Lisa. Now, it's our final panel of the day, and it's, I think, a really interesting one, hopefully. Energy security, turbines on the front line. I'm going to ask our 4 panelists to join me on stage for this one. We have Stefan Thiem, Managing Director of the Federal Association of Offshore Wind Energy, otherwise known as BWO, here in Germany. Anu Eslas, Head of European and Baltic Affairs for Ignitis Group. Laura Watson, Energy Transition Leader, Risk Consulting at AXA XL. And Adrian Del Maestro, Global Energy Advisory Lead for AECOM. Please join me. Right, welcome everyone. Thank you very much for taking part in our panel here. Now, turbines on the front line, fairly dramatic title for our session, but I think justified. And we're going to look at 2 issues. We're going to look at turbines as physical infrastructure deployed out in the field, and sometimes literally on the front line of geopolitical flashpoints, and we're going to look at the front line of what you might want to call the cyber war, so cyber security. We're going to look at both, and with your help. And I'm going to start with critical infrastructure, because we've heard a lot today how wind power now is seen as more than just a producer of green electrons. It's very important, it is that, but it's also increasingly a large part of the whole energy system. And it's seen as critical to those systems. And I think governments want that. Governments want to see wind power taking its place as a part of a national infrastructure. Now, when it becomes critical infrastructure, governments, what can we expect from governments? Stefan, I want to start with you. What do you need from governments as wind power becomes a part of the critical infrastructure? What needs to change?
Thank you for having me here and for the opportunity to speak about this topic. I would like to step one step backwards, because we should ask ourselves, why do we want to protect our critical infrastructure? Why do we want to protect offshore wind farms? And the reason is that if our critical infrastructure does not work, this has the potential to disturb our public order. So if the public order is disturbed, the trust of the citizens into the state is weakened in the end, and this makes it more difficult for the state to defend against attacks. So it's a very crucial interest of the state to keep critical infrastructure working. And when we speak about energy supply, of course, offshore wind energy is part of this. And now let's shift to the second perspective, to the branch perspective. We have all seen the failed auction in August 25, and this happened due to a lack of trust of the investors. And now we have to bring these perspectives together somehow. Yep. This will end in a division of roles and obligations. We need a clear division between the requirements to the branch on the one side. Investors need to know before auctions what's coming up to them. and a clear commitment from the state to defend the critical infrastructure, because otherwise investors will not invest in Germany. Or Europe, or anywhere else.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. This applies in many countries now. I mean, from Germany's point of view, are you getting that? Are you getting these commitments? Are you getting these structures emerging? Are we going to see this?
Yeah, we see that the structures are built already. I mean, at least they are on the way. The NIS2 Implementation Act has passed already the Bundestag and the Bundesrat. We are waiting for the signature of the Bundespräsident. With the Kritisches Dachgesetz, we are a little bit late in Germany due to the change of government. But yeah, we passed also the first lecture in the parliament, and now the working groups in the Bundestag do their job. And I expect that both acts will get into force in January 2025. So we are going on this way, but we need it faster. And we need a clear commitment from our government. This is your responsibility, this is ours, and therefore we need a structured dialogue about what is necessary to be done. And
what will the protection look like in practice?
I think from the perspective of the branch, it can be only that way, that the provision of data is done by the branch itself, because we have some data we can share with the authorities. But the high-end protection against sabotage and any other attacks against the critical infrastructure, this protection must be provided clearly by the state. It's not our task, to put it simply and maybe a little bit exaggerated. Our technicians are no soldiers.
Yeah, so and what you're saying fundamentally is there needs to be a clear demarcation of responsibility. Who's responsible for what in this deployment of these assets? Okay, Anu, can I turn to you? I mean, you're involved with Ignitis Group in getting wind power up and running in the Baltic states, where this is a really key issue. I mean, energy security, providing energy that is not dependent on Russian gas and other sources, and also deploying assets in potentially areas that are potentially exposed to these risks. So, tell us the context there and how is that proceeding? What are the challenges and what are the opportunities for developing wind power under those circumstances?
Thank you. I hope my mic is working, so it's all good. Really happy to be here. Really excited to talk about Baltics and actually German cooperation also about that one. But maybe again that everybody understands what we are talking about. Baltic states, 6 million people together, 6 million. We are producing or consuming, let's say, we are consuming 5 times less power than Poland, 15 times less power than Germany, but we can produce 7 times more than we need. So there is a lot of sea, there is lots of areas, there is lots of willingness from the countries to give back something what we have more and share it with Europe. And of course, yes, there have been lately, recent years, many attacks, many sabotage, many hybrid, interventions. You can call them planned, unplanned. It is how it is. But those are a reality. And as I have been a little bit in my past also involved in the military, so I would say that the risk assessments are increasing. Maybe when you are a little bit further away, then you don't see it every day, but we do see that, planes flying in our countries, drones are flying into the countries, creeds are cut already, 11 creeds, 6 times at least in the recent years. So those activities are happening constantly every day, almost every minute. And just that you understand it, what we have managed to do, of course, when we became independent in 91, we were connected to the Russian grid. Our electricity was provided by the Russia. So inertia was there, everything were there. And only by the 2007, we started to have the interconnection project to connect it to the Europe grid. We just managed to finalize it this year. So finally we can say that we are independent. And this is something what I think many people don't realize it, that finally we have at least grid what it cannot be manipulated by somebody else. Now, another thing, of course, we had our fossils. We were dependent on import. In 2010, when Lithuania decided to stop nuclear power plant, they had only 20% of the local production of energy. Everything else came from outside, mostly indeed in Russia. In 2002, when the war started, everybody stopped. Electricity prices raises, and now finally we have 70% of the local production. We have increased 4 times with so short time. If this is not the commitment, I don't know what it is. And if this is not the transmission, I don't know what it is. But again, we are doing that because we believe that this is needed, this is best for the people, and not also for us, but also for Europe. And therefore, I think that what we are really looking a little bit further and looking in the long run, that energy security is connecting the markets, interconnecting the markets. Because if somebody is telling me that, hey, let's stop to interconnect the markets because they are so vulnerable, they can be, cut out, then exactly this is something what our friendly neighbor wants to hear.
So increased deployment, more energy independence, but against the background, as you've explained, of increasing incidents and increasing attempts at interference. So how do you, what do you need to protect those assets? How do you do that?
I was just sharing recently also that, for example, in Estonia, the critical infrastructure comes when the company owns 90 megawatt of the assets, 90. Then you are already critical infrastructure. That means you are priority for the country. Also, one offshore wind park in the Baltic States total is 15 capacity of total consumption. So it is a big risk. What we need is that we are talking the same language with military, with government, with industry. Closed doors, because not everything needs to be known to everybody. What we need is that we know, as you indeed nicely said, that there is division of labor, but the laws are not fighting the war, or not making the phone call when the attacks happen, or you see the drones coming in. You need to know the phone number to call to, exactly. And the person have to know how the operation comes. We don't have yet knowledge if something really important will happen, what we will do with that. When you look Ukraine, it is not only that, okay, let's start to protect everything, let's cover the cables or whatever. We have to be ready to rebuild everything in the way that we don't know how to do it.
Yeah.
So basically, one number, operational trainings, and ready to repair everything tomorrow.
Yeah, so I think already we've heard that cooperation and at least a kind of understanding between the wind industry and the military. I want to ask you this. I mean, quite often in European wind development, we see military and developers going in opposite directions. We've seen, for example, Sweden, the Swedish waters. We've seen large amounts of wind projects cancelled by order of the government because of a perceived conflict with the military. We've seen in the UK a lot. We've seen radar conflicts. So, how do we get the military and renewables development, specifically wind, moving in lockstep together? Who does that? It needs to be the government, presumably. We need to get the two working together. How does that happen?
If I may, I actually think that this is not the problem anymore. We, the offshore especially, and I think also onshore, the military have started to see that or Navy even, that we are actually asset what can be used to have more eyes and ears in the ground or in the water, underwater, everywhere. I think that the dialogue have been happening. The problem is simply, energy companies don't know the military terms and military operations, how they train and why they do that, and vice versa. There is those dialogues. At least I can say that in Wind Europe, for example, we have the special task force. We have Navy people, military people talking there, and the industry is there.
Okay, Stefan, yeah.
I would like to add on this, because you're completely right, I agree totally on this, but there's another point. What would it mean if we would stop expansion of offshore wind? This means that we would further depend on energy imports, and more dependencies mean finally that we probably would import more natural gas. Where from is the question? And maybe, at least at this point, there comes a question mark, are our partners that reliable that as we wish it? Because 20 years ago, we trusted Russia, and we imported a lot of natural gas. Okay, this ended now, but what is with our current partners, and how will our market develop if we import more natural gas? And this is not including the question if we can reach our climate goals. It's also.
I do hope that I was never mentioning that let's stop offshore wind. Vice versa, I'm one of the believers, 100%, that we have to build it. But what I wanted to say that I think that the military is there, that they see us as a valuable asset. Yes, we have this Swedish case. I cannot comment too much about it because maybe there is some argumentation why they made those decisions. Again, I don't know all, therefore we cannot comment it, but I can see also that there is lots of political will topic, because this country have a right to decide that, okay, I prefer some other technology, but everybody else are there. We are actually working together to make those things happen.
Exactly.
100%, so
I mean, and you're saying that, that wind can be an active player, an active military asset.
Let's not militarize everything. I think.
I mean, we have heard discussion about that, about turbines, maybe having sensors or some kind. I mean, is that desirable? Is that a road that the wind industry wants to go down?
I think that every company and every country have to find their own way. And yes, I think that when we can provide added information to have some sensors, some technology. Yes, but I think that the militarization of the assets, I think there is a thin line, and this is the dialogue that who does what, who protects what, who invests what, because of course there is so many questions, and this is something what I'm saying, that laws are not fighting the wars, because we simply need to know whom we are working with.
Okay. Yeah. I wonder if our other panelists have any views on this topic.
Yeah, I'd like to chip in. Firstly, great to be here. As a Brit, it's always great to be in Europe, so thank you for that. Look, if I take the big picture, energy security is the top theme right now amongst governments and corporates. And there was certainly an expectation, I think in military circles in Europe, there were a number of advocates saying we need to look to renewables as a way to address energy security and not rely on hostile states vis-a-vis hydrocarbon imports, What's interesting is we've traded off one energy insecurity issue for another. There was a naive assumption that moving to cleaner technology renewables would mean that we would be immune to some of these geopolitical shifts. The reality is that's not the case now. If you look at the dependence of clean technology on digital platforms that require sensors and components, a large proportion of which are imported from China, that's potentially an issue. The fact that rare earth elements, strategic minerals that we use to build wind turbines and other forms of renewable technology, there's a high concentration from Asian suppliers. So we've kind of found ourselves in a bit of a tricky situation here. The other thing I'd flag is, you all know about the energy trilemma, and we've seen a cycle in the last few decades. If you cast your minds back to COP26, that was very much about the sustainability angle of the energy transition. The last few years since, obviously, with Ukraine, it's been very much energy security. The thing that we're beginning to see now, at least I see it in the UK, I see it in the US, and I begin to see it in other parts of Europe, is affordability, the cost of living crisis. And I sometimes muse whether that energy security issue is going to come into conflict with that affordability issue. We talked today about the cost competitive nature of some of these Asian turbines, right? Is there a situation in the future where we're going to be tempted to go down that path simply because affordability may become of equal importance to national security? Not sure.
But, absolutely. I think that affordability and resilience and security is, at the moment, we are in a tricky situation because we have not prepared the security side because we never thought that this is real. You know, as you said, that we were trusted our friendly neighbor many years. But at the moment, we have to do those investments. We have to a little bit cover the higher expenses because the war is even more expensive. You know? And this is something what we have to, everybody, society, have to understand that maybe even don't you feel it, you know, but we see it every day.
Yeah. And just briefly, your earlier question about should business be involved in this? I think that's quite a tricky thing because I can see business collaborating with military and government around defense, but that's just another layer of complexity there on top of everything else that's being dealt with. And the thing about business is generally business has navigated that central path of trying to be impartial. I think again back to COP26, one of the big turning points there that business took over from government in terms of addressing the energy transition. I think in defense, that's a more thorny issue.
Yeah. Okay, really interesting. Let's move the conversation onto that other front line, the cyber front line. Laura, you've done a lot of work in this field. Do you think the wind industry is understanding the level of threat from cyber threats, and do you think they're taking the necessary measures at the moment?
That's a great question, and again, thanks for having me and inviting the insurer along to the conference. It's great to be here. So, at AXA, we do an annual report, which is looking at future risk report, and we've done it for a number of years, and consistently, that cyber comes out as the top risk. And this year, the top 3 risks have been climate change, geopolitics, and cyber. The 4th risk this year has actually come out as AI, which kind of ties into the cyber piece. So we have a team. So in risk consulting, which is part of the insurance, we have a whole team of engineers that will assess risks. So both physical risks. If a developer's building a wind farm, we would assess the physical risks and provide advice. But similarly, we have a team that would do the same for cyber. The key message is, and I think all insurers would say this, is to engage with your insurer early. So before you've even thought about a project, engage with your insurer. We can provide that expert advice on the risks, on the risk profile, on risk mitigation, risk transfer. So before you've even developed your project, we can help sort of prevent the risks resulting in, you know, for both physical and cyber assets. But what we've seen over the last few years is that cyber attacks have become more sophisticated. Yep. And a lot of them are now looking at system. I had some statistics on this, which I haven't brought up with me, but I think almost 50% are using system vulnerabilities. And in a wind farm, obviously there's a lot of parts of the system, there's a lot of supply chain, and then there's been a few mentions of this earlier throughout the day about kill switches and what could you do remotely. So it's really important to look at those vulnerabilities. You might find that where there's been a merger and acquisition and 2 companies have come together, that there might be one company that's got more vulnerabilities than the other. So we can see that as well. So, but yeah, it's challenging. And I think as technology is evolving and as AI is evolving and the cyber attackers are becoming more strategic in there, especially when we're talking about critical assets as well.
Yeah. Adrian, I mean, you've done, AECOM, you've done some work on this issue, I know, recently. I think to summarise the findings, if I'm right, you know, it's shot up the agenda, as Laura's just just outlined in terms of concern, but maybe we're not quite there yet in response. So what's going on, have you found?
Yeah, so we did a report, if you want to Google it afterwards, called Power at Risk, and we commissioned our excellent partner, Cyber Energia, to produce it. I think the key themes, I'll go through the stats in a second. I think the key themes is cyber is not being treated as a strategic priority by business, and it needs to, and not enough investment is being made. Some of the data that came out of the report, based on the respondents that we interviewed, 95% of them recognized that they spend about 1% to 2% of revenue on cyber, which is not enough. About 70% of them recognize that cyber is a major issue, particularly through the lens of the supply chain. I think DNV came out with a similar cyber report. About 65% of their respondents recognize cyber as the most critical business issue. Same survey taken 2-3 years ago, it was about 30%, so a significant uplift. About 20% maximum of those respondents are regularly updating their network security equipment on a regular basis, so a lot more needs to be done there. In terms of what are the things that will change that, because you can sing to the heavens about you need to invest in this, I think there's a number of factors there. I think that inevitably there's a regulatory angle. I think probably governments have some kind of role there to push business in the right direction. Again, the UK literally just a few days ago released some new legislation on cyber resilience, where they put pressure on IT suppliers to critical national infrastructure like health, like energy, to have minimum standards. They have to declare if there's been a cyber incident, and they're also open up to fines now as a percentage of their revenue. That aspect of transparency, I think, is important as well. I don't think the industry, and I'm talking here more broadly, the energy industry, there's unsurprisingly a reluctance to admit when there have been cyber incidents. And I think it's very difficult, unless the industry becomes much more transparent, to have that baseline in terms of what's actually happening and using that as a way to collaborate and share information with one another. So I think there's a number of steps there that business can do. And probably the other one that I would just mention as well is, apart from investment in the actual equipment to address cyber threats, I think there's a big organizational, cultural aspect as well. Probably the biggest weak chain in the armor is people, and therefore you need to educate people on dealing with cyber threats. I can tell you from a personal basis, at AECOM, we have relentless tests of false emails, phishing emails, that test us to see if we respond in the right way. And I was appalling at the beginning. I'm much better now. And I think that awareness, that training of people will be an important aspect.
I want to jump in, just saying why you were surprised about that. Listen, now think each country of you. We had NATO 3% target, 2% target, 5% targets in the defense budget every year. Nobody reached that except the Baltics. And now you're saying that, the regulation will make the change. No, it won't. Because only when the country started to increase the defense budget was when actually something happened. So therefore, I think, once again, laws are not making anything happen. Only when the people understand what is the importance. And you mentioned really nicely that you are assessing the risks, but we even don't have the same threat assessment. Because we are, basically next to the neighbor. We see it, they are targeting us every day. Even, in Lithuania, they're sending balloons from Belarus. We have to stop our airports. It will have a tremendous impact on the economy. And they are saying it's a hybrid, so it's not our case. But I think that this is exactly the case. People don't understand the reality. We don't have a common threat assessment. Therefore, we also don't have a common standard how to approach. Then Poland is asking one of the equipment into the offshore wind side. We are having another one. And maybe in France it's a little bit different.
Stefan, any views from you on this? I mean, cyber security, and in Germany, is it being addressed by the industry? And is the industry getting the assistance it needs to address it?
To address cyber security? okay, we monitor a lot of attacks, and of course, from my point of view, we see that operators are doing a good job. Otherwise, we would have seen already blackouts. Let me say something different. You are asking about cyber attacks, but I was still thinking about what you said, and you were speaking about manufacturers not from Europe, and especially you spoke about Chinese manufacturers. And this is a discussion which causes some concerns in our association, as you can imagine. I mean, we represent not only the manufacturers, but also the developers. And in our current political discussion, we are facing a cost discussion, a discussion about, of course, energy security, but also a focus on costs. And if we want to see more competition and lower prices, then we need a global market. And that's why we in Germany, as BWO, we pledge for the global market and as less restrictions as possible. What does it mean? I mean, we cannot make a total, and cannot say in total, we don't want China's turbines. What we want are secure turbines, and therefore we have to trust into our engineers. We have to find ways how to make these turbines secure for us.
So this feeds into the discussion we had earlier in the day with the two opposing views. I think the clear message from the Chinese supplier, from representative from Mingyang, was we can and we will make these turbines secure. We have ways we can do it. We can secure the data. Do you accept that that's possible?
I don't want to be misunderstood. I'm not pro-Chinese. I'm pro-global market. And yes, I believe.
Do you accept at a technical level it's possible to get that level of integrity?
I accept that this is possible, and even if it is not in every part possible, we should discuss which parts of the turbines can be manufactured elsewhere, and we have to look deeper into this topic than just to say, okay, we don't want turbines from.
But again, let's be honest, we even cannot have one common standard in Europe, so let's start something smaller. So I think let's figure it out how to do in Europe with inverters and what we actually want, and then we can do the global side, because if you start to global directly, then it might be...
No, it's not about finding a global standard. It's about checking if these turbines are secure for us. And this is something we can do. I'm quite sure about this.
Yeah, I mean, Laura, I want to bring you back into the discussion. I mean, we've heard a lot about cyber security. We've been talking about physical risks to turbines, maybe from physical attack. You know, as an insurer who kind of looks at risk all the time, how does this change the way you may view a project or a region in terms of a development and its insurability? How do you take all this into account as someone who's insuring projects?
Well, we have a team, as I mentioned earlier, we have a team of engineers, we have a global team that are focused on energy transition, other technologies. So every project's looked at on a project-by-project basis. You know, we'd look at things like the weather risk, natural catastrophe, where is it in the world? Is it prone to windstorm, typhoon? You'd look at the physical security. I guess for cables, you'd look at supply chain cable manufacturer. How's the cable being laid? You know, understanding that a lot of the failures would occur during construction. Cable protection, and then I think we wouldn't necessarily be looking at cable protection from we'd maybe be looking at fishing vessels, or is it buried deep enough? But it gets kind of feeding in what we've been talking about. Like, I think historically you would assume that if a cable had the right depth, then it would be protected. And the fact that a wind farm is remote, then that might offer some protection because it's difficult to get to. It's not like you would just be out on a day trip and stumble across a wind farm.
So there's a variety of...
There's a variety. It's hard to say because it's a kind of global picture that we look at, and obviously we manage a portfolio, so the risks are all different.
Sure, yeah. Okay, thanks. I mean, Anu, I want to come back to you as we, as we draw to the final few minutes of our session. And when you've been kind of very forthright about the fact that you are, as you say, next to the neighbour. And I just want to try and get a sense from you, from the energy industry in particular. What are you seeing in terms of actual kind of interferences and threats? Give us some give us some examples of really what you're seeing on a kind of daily or weekly basis.
I don't remember at the moment the exact numbers, how many times we are cyber attacked daily, I have to say, but this is the topics like what we are seeing every day, of course. The cable cutting, shadow vessels, they are also there. As S-Link 2 with Finnish-Estonian interconnections, of course, and then it will have impact to our prices because we don't have yet 100% full independence. But what you see so many other things. Also from the people side, as you mentioned quite correctly, you can be used by the cyber, but on the other hand also that there may be some other ways to integrate to the market and have a long-term plan to influence our data, or I think actually this is even more critical that they become so smart that we don't know that we are manipulated. And this is something what I think the data integrity is super important topic, that we make sure that the data what we are relying on is the correct data. So therefore, I think that we will have more and more manipulation in a way that we are not even known that we are manipulated, not only by information, but with the data. And this is something what at least we are becoming more and more afraid of, because if it's a physical, you can see.
Yeah.
If it's a attack, you can see. But if it's a clever way manipulating us in the way that you are not sure, is it a wake effect or is it something else, or is it something, from the unknowns, then bad wind, maybe.
Sure. Okay. I'd like to see, any questions from the audience to our panelists. I think we've heard some, interesting perspectives here. Anyone got any questions to? Here we go. We'll bring a microphone.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. For Laura, regarding the Chinese manufacturers, are the insurance companies looking at any specific studies to bring them into the market? I mean, will be a different profile for to insure a project that provides a Chinese manufacturer?
We were actually talking about this earlier with someone else. We've started to look at it, like the team have started to look at it, but I'm not a kind of super specialist expert on it. But obviously we insure a global portfolio, so different developers use different turbines. So each project we look at on a case-by-case basis and look at the supply chain and look at everything. So I can't really, there's not a yes or no there, I'm afraid.
Any other questions? Okay. Look, it's been a great panel to close the day, I think. Thank you very much. And I'm going to invite the audience to give you a round of applause and stay well. Thank you. Right. So thanks again to our final panel, and I hope all of you have enjoyed today as much as I have helping to steer it along with the support of many others. We've heard a lot of talking points that I think go to the heart of what I'd call the Recharge DNA in terms of the way we report the industry. Some of the things that really fire up our subscribers, our readers. Wind wakes, the role of Chinese turbines in the wider industry, policy, what is and isn't working. All those things, I think, we'll continue to report on, and I hope you'll come on that journey with us. So thank you very much. And I'm going to invite Pranjal back onto the stage now for some final words and an exciting announcement, I think.
May I please invite up on the stage Claes-Ulrik Selbach, Vice President of Hamburg Messe and Congress, and Mr. Alan Yu, Executive Director for Europe with Enterprise Singapore. Please. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here with us today. I hope this has been a very, very productive day with great insights and networking, of course. Today has been a very important day for all of us, for another region also. Earlier today, as Heiko shared, Recharge and Wind Energy Hamburg are joining forces to bring a major new international wind event to Singapore in May 2026. This will be an annual platform for the industry in Asia, developed in collaboration with Enterprise Singapore and Singapore Tourism Board. Earlier this afternoon, I forgot to move this. Earlier this afternoon at the Hamburg City Hall, we signed the MOU between Recharge, Hamburg Messe and Congress, Singapore Tourism Board, and Enterprise Singapore, witnessed by the first mayor of Hamburg and the ambassador of Singapore to Germany. There are some nice pictures. This partnership connects Europe's leading wind event with Asia's most dynamic hub for clean energy hub and innovation, Singapore. This event opens a new chapter for Singapore and the wider region. The wind sector is growing fast across Asia Pacific, and we believe this collaboration gives the industry a platform that matches that ambition. We are very grateful for the support from the Singapore Tourism Board. Po Chi Chuan is sitting here, Enterprise Singapore, Alan Yu here, and I'm very pleased to share the next step. In May 2026, we will launch the Recharge Wind Power Summit Asia Pacific, powered by Wind Energy Hamburg in Singapore. From 2027 onwards, the event will continue as Wind Energy Asia Pacific, powered by Recharge. With that news, may I request Uli to say a few words, please.
All right, thank you. So what I do? This works. Yeah, I just got back from Singapore from last week. It's a beautiful place, and for us, we feel it's the right place to move our Wind Energy Hamburg with. Next year we will have about 1,700 exhibitors and about 40,000 participants. And so we will not move the whole Wind Energy Hamburg to Singapore, but we will start with the Recharge Wind Power Summit conference and a side exhibition. We are counting about 100 exhibitors that would join us next year from May 19th to 20th. And so why Asia Pacific? And there are many reasons for that. We have many markets who are investing in wind energy. I mean, I had to learn in Singapore itself, there's the equator, so there's not that much wind. But there are many other emerging countries around, from the Philippines, Thailand, Vietnam, up to Australia, who are investing heavily in on and offshore wind energy. And so far, there is no event that actually covers all of that region. I mean, we have very strong partners in the market in China and also in India. But there, as we as exhibition organizers feel, there's still a white spot left on the map, and that's Asia Pacific in total. And it all makes it easier when you have strong partners. So I think our database at Wind Energy Hamburg, we have about 70,000 contacts worldwide through our visitors, our exhibitors, adding the 30,000 by Recharge. So we will go full speed this afternoon. The first newsletter will go out. And it helps a lot when we have this strong partnership and that you are pushed and supported by the government of Singapore with the two government organizations, Enterprise Singapore and Singapore Tourism Board. And we feel it's also a bridge that we are building from Europe to the Asia-Pacific region by doing these events starting next year in May. Wow, that was quick, because that was it from my side? No? Something went off. Did I kill the system?
No.
So, glad that, but this is the right button here, yeah?
Yes.
Okay, so it's the last slide anyways. So we are your partners. We hopefully see you all next year in Singapore, and I'm getting a bit thirsty myself now, but I heard rumors that our caterer, Käfer, he managed to get tiger beer to this location, which is from Singapore. And now I'm taking his main message away from his board. So please, Alan, it's yours.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Manjal, Uli. Excited to be here. I understand I'm standing between everyone and your well-deserved break for beer, but I have unfortunate news that the tiger beer couldn't make it in time because the deliverer had some issues. So we just got to make do with German beer, but come to Singapore, you could have tiger beer. Yeah. But on the behalf of Enterprise Singapore, but also our Singapore Tourism Board, we are really excited to host these two events in Singapore in the coming years, especially next year, the Recharge Wind Power Summit, but in 27 onwards, the Wind Energy Asia Pacific. Two very renowned and global events in its own stand, and right in the heart of Asia. I mean, Uli has already mentioned why Asia Pacific. I was going to touch on a few things, but I don't want to repeat that now. We had a full day of insights and exciting knowledge sharing about the future of the wind energy industry, about innovation, technology, and what's the future of it like. These conversations that you have is happening in Asia Pacific as well. We have one of the largest installed base of wind energy in the world, 600 gigawatts, if my statistics were correct, in 2024, and it's growing. So it is a base of action, and we believe that Singapore can be a hub of the action. Uli touched about why Asia Pacific. Let me talk about why Singapore, other than tiger beer from Singapore, of course. We're at 1 degree north of the equator. We do not have wind, but I promise you warm weather and lots of sun. Right? It's going to be hot. But more importantly, Singapore sits in the heart of Asia. It's arguably one of the best places to get an overview and oversight of the whole of Asia, right? All the way from India, the Pacific, as well as North Asia. But equally important, Singapore is small but very ambitious, just like the city of Hamburg. Firstly, we are looking to import over 60 gigawatt of low-carbon energy by 2035 to supplement our energy needs and in our drive to be carbon neutral in the future years. All of this mix, 1.2 gigawatts will be imported from Vietnam, developed by our own Sembcorp, as well as Vietnam's, get its name correct, PTSC. Right? So we are vested in the wind energy sector, and we are very keen to welcome everyone into this show in the years to come. This is Wind Energy Hamburg's first overseas attempt, and we look forward to the great partnership between the Recharge Group, DN Media Group, Hamburg Messe, Wind Energy Hamburg, and as well as my sister agency, Singapore Tourism Board, to make this work. To borrow a word from our ambassador during the MOU signing, let's make this a win-win partnership for all of us, between Hamburg and Singapore, between the MOU partners, but more importantly, between all the participants who will come and join us during these two shows. So we look forward to warmly welcoming you to Singapore in due time, and have a lovely evening ahead. Thank you.
That's it, everyone. We are not going to stop you from your beer. Let's go out, have a sip, and keep the conversations going. Thank you very much once again for being here today. It has been an amazing day. Thank you.
Thank you, Francois.
Thank you,
Alan.
Thank you
very much.
But is there again a change in the beer delivery?